Hello friends, welcome to the virtual Sunday school class. Today we will study about a leading church father who contributed to the development of our faith and defended it against false teachings. Kindly turn to lesson 25 of your Sunday school textbook of class 8. By now, you would have guessed about whom am I talking. Yes, you are right. Today's class will be on Saint Gregarious of Nazianzus. He is also known as Saint Gregory of Nazianzus. For your convenience, the chapter has been divided into three parts. As you can see, first we will deal with a brief life sketch of Saint Gregory or Saint Gregarious of Nazianzus. Then we will see how he became a monk. That will be covered under the heading A Monk in the Making. The third head, as you can see, is very vital part of this chapter. Why we remember him, his theological contributions, which will be under the third and the last part. So let's get going into the chapter. As you can see here, before we go further, the icon of Saint Gregarious of Nazianzus. This is the available picture of how Saint Gregarious appeared to the church. Before we go into the brief life sketch of Saint Gregarious or Saint Gregory, it is very important for you children to know that this church father was known by two titles. One was he was a Cappadocian father. What is a Cappadocian father? I believe you would have come across this term in your early lessons or early classes. Yes, Cappadocia is in modern day Turkey. This city of Cappadocia also was home to two other fathers of the church, Saint Basil and Saint Gregory of Nyssa, who were brothers. Saint Gregory of Nazianzus is also known as a Cappadocian father because he hailed from Cappadocia in modern day Turkey. The other title to which Saint Gregory is famous is the title of Theologos. This title was given to Saint Gregory at Synod of Chalcedon in AD 451. As you are aware, the title Theologos is not given to many. Before Saint Gregory, this title was only given to the Apostle Saint John. Now let's go into the brief life sketch of Saint Gregory. This church father lived during the time AD 330 to 390. This life sketch of 60 years was very eventful. Saint Gregory was born in Nazianzus. This was a small Cappadocian town in the year AD 330. His parents were very wealthy. About his mother, it is said, she was an ardent Christian who converted her husband to become a Christian. Saint Gregory's father, also known by the name Gregarious, became a bishop of Nazianzus in AD 372. Between AD 330 to 362, This was the time when the young Gregory did his education. He completed his primary education from Alexandria, and then, for his higher studies, he went to Athens. In Athens, he excelled in rhetoric and philosophy. It was there that he became good friends with Saint Basil, whom we also know as the Cappadocian Father. In AD 362, on his return from Athens, Saint Gregory was ordained a priest. Between AD 362 to 372, Saint Gregory dedicated his life as a monk at the Saint Basil's monastery. In AD 372 came the other turning point in his life when he was consecrated a bishop of Sassima by his friend and his teacher, Saint Basil. In AD 379, he became the bishop of Constantinople. In AD 381, he was made the Patriarch of Constantinople. You would be aware that the Council of Constantinople happened during this year, and as the Patriarch of Constantinople, it was Saint Gregarious who presided over it. Between 381 to 383, this was the time when Saint Gregarious decided to return to Sassima, where he first was, and after that he retired from active church service. The last we heard about him was in AD 390. On January 25th, he left for his heavenly abode at the age of 60. So we know that this person or this church father had great qualities in him. Let us look at what was the reason for such a person who belonged to a wealthy family, who had the best of his education, to turn to God. Obviously, he had a calling, and this calling came after a turning point in his life. This is where we come across the next part of this chapter, where we see how he became a monk. The first turning point of his life came when he was on his way to Athens. Young Gregory, when he was in the ship, that ship encountered a violent storm. Suddenly, the ship began to sink, and young Gregory prayed to God. He only said that if God would save him from this violent storm, he will dedicate his life to the service of God. Obviously, God heard his prayer, and the young Gregory was saved. On reaching Athens, he kept his promise and decided that he will serve God rather than anything else. This became the first turning point of his life. There was a second turning point. We know that at Athens, Saint Gregory came in touch with Saint Basil, and both of them became good friends. But Saint Basil, who had influenced Saint Gregory to become a monk, had a greater influence over the life of Saint Gregory. After Saint Gregory became a priest, his father wanted him to take up parish duties or parish responsibilities. But young Gregory never wanted to take up parish responsibilities, and he had a liking to become a monk. So, by the influence of Saint Basil, Gregory fled from his parents and from all his community and went to spend a life of solitude at St. Basil's monastery. That is where he had his recalling or his reckoning with God. This completes the second part of the chapter and brings us to the last part of the chapter, that is, what were the theological contributions of Saint Gregory of Nazianzus. We come across the term theologos or theologian. We had studied that this was the title that was given to Saint Gregory at the Council of Chalcedon in AD 451. So let's try to understand, why did the church designate him as theologian or theologos? This had to do with his qualities and his abilities and his contributions to the church that he made during his lifetime. We know that he had gone to the spiritual abode in AD 390, but till then he had given a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of possessions for the church to keep forever. He was a great poet and a powerful orator. We know these qualities that had begun to take root in him when he was in Alexandria and later when he was in Athens. We also see this quality of his powerful oration at the Council of Constantinople, which he had presided. So at Council of Constantinople, he established the full Godhead of Son and Holy Spirit. This was an important part of our faith, an article of our faith that he established at the Council of Constantinople. It was this contribution by Saint Gregory of Nazianzus that helped formulate the third paragraph of the Nicene Creed. He also explained the theory of theosis. What is theosis? Well, the term itself has something to do with God, right? So, theosis means God becoming man, the very theory of incarnation, that God, Jesus Christ, became man. This forms a major element in the Orthodox spirituality, and it was explained beautifully by Saint Gregory of Nazianzus. During his time, there was the Emperor Julian of Rome, who used to inflict a lot of harm and torture upon Christians. To overcome Emperor Julian's injustice, in fact, Emperor Julian happened to be a classmate of Saint Gregory at Athens. So, to overcome Emperor Julian's injustice, Saint Gregory wrote a book. This was called Invectives Against Julian. In that book, he showed Christians the path of love and patience that they need to keep to finally overcome the injustice meted out to them by Emperor Julian. Saint Gregory also defended the Orthodox spirituality and convinced a lot of heretics of that time to join the church. His teachings on the Holy Trinity, the procession of the Holy Spirit from the Father and the Son, form significant treatises of the church. Finally, we come across St. Gregory's sermons and writings which reflect his holiness and theological depth. These were the reasons that his theological contributions made way for the Council of Chalcedon in AD 451 to designate Saint Gregory as Theologos or theologian. So, dear children, we have finally come to the end of this lesson. Before we conclude, let us have a quick revision of what we have learned. Saint Gregory was a Cappadocian father. He was born in AD 330 at Arianzus in Nazianzus to wealthy parents. His father was a married bishop. Now you would have come across this doubt that whether bishops could marry. Obviously, this is a pertinent question. During that time, bishops were permitted to married people were permitted to become bishops, and the reference of it is written by St. Paul in his letter to Timothy. I will read First Timothy chapter 3 verses 1 to 2, and this is what it says. This is a faithful saying. If a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, the husband of one wife, temperate, sober minded, of good behavior, hospitable, able to teach. So here we find that St. Paul tells us that the qualities of bishop, he can be the husband of one wife. And it was during that time that the father of St. Gregory, he, despite being married, became a bishop. Now, the next revision that you would like to have is about St. Gregory's trip to Athens. This was a life changing trip, and at Athens, where he studied rhetoric and philosophy, he became friends with St. Basil. He joined St. Basil's monastery before becoming bishop. He was a champion of the Orthodox faith, defended false teachings, and explained doctrines on Holy Trinity and the Holy Spirit. He formulated the third paragraph of the Creed, the Nicene Creed, at the Council of Constantinople. His feast day falls on January 25th every year. He was designated Theologos in AD 451 by the Council of Chalcedon. With this, we come to an end of this chapter. I hope you understood and could make notes of this lesson from this lecture. Thank you.